Wayne Blake never anticipated that the empire he built with precision and pride would be where betrayal and deceit festered unchecked. From humble beginnings as a construction worker's son in the Midwest, Wayne rose to create the Blakewood Hotel, a haven of luxury meant to stand for integrity and respect. But everything he built teetered on the edge of collapse, hidden behind the gilded facade. The whispers started with Greg Parker, his trusted supervisor, whose arrogance had poisoned the staff. Yet the greatest sting came not from betrayal, but from witnessing his vision turned cold and transactional. "You think walking in here unnoticed changes anything?" Greg's voice dripped with disdain as he crossed his arms in the service corridor. Wayne, his voice calm but cutting, stared him down. "No, Greg. What changes everything is what happens when you've forgotten who owns this place." Tensions mounted with each uncovered lie, each act of cruelty Wayne saw firsthand. As the cracks in his empire grew wider, Wayne's mission became clear: to root out the rot and rebuild, not just the hotel, but the trust that once defined it. But would Wayne's resolve be enough to save the people who still believed in his vision? Or would the weight of betrayal and doubt crush them all? Only time would tell. The rain poured relentlessly over the streets of Seattle, a steady drumming that echoed through the dimly lit city. Pedestrians hurried past in a blur of umbrellas and soaked jackets, their heads bent low against the wind. Among them, a man trudged along the slick sidewalks, his worn leather boots splashing through puddles. His name was Wayne Blake, though tonight he looked nothing like the influential owner of the prestigious Blakewood Hotel. The lobby was everything Wayne had designed it to be: luxurious, warm, and inviting. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over the polished marble floors, and plush chairs sat in carefully arranged clusters, offering guests a sense of intimacy amidst the opulence. Wayne's gaze lingered on the intricate details for a moment, details he had painstakingly chosen to ensure his hotel felt like a home away from home for its guests. He pushed through the revolving doors, water dripping from his coat onto the immaculate floor. Heads turned subtly as Wayne entered, the click of his boots muffled by the plush rug. The contrast between his disheveled appearance and the elegance of the surroundings was stark, a ripple of unease moving through the space. Behind the reception desk stood Emma Whitmore, her figure poised like a sculpture of perfection. She wore a tailored navy blazer that matched the pristine gold-etched nameplate pinned above her heart. Her auburn hair was swept into a sleek bun, and her expression was a careful balance of professionalism and aloofness. As her eyes landed on Wayne, a flicker of disdain crossed her face before she masked it with a practiced smile. "Good evening," Wayne said, his voice calm but firm. He stepped forward, his boots squeaking faintly against the polished floor. Emma's eyes darted to his worn boots and then to the rain-soaked coat he carried awkwardly in his hands. "Good evening, sir. May I help you?" Her tone was clipped, her smile brittle. "Yes," Wayne replied, placing his old leather wallet on the counter. "I'd like a room for the night." Emma hesitated, her well-trained instincts kicking in. She glanced over Wayne's shoulder, noting the absence of a sleek car or well-dressed companion. Everything about him screamed misfit, a man out of place in a world of luxury. Still, she forced her smile to widen. "I'm sorry, but we're fully booked for tonight." Wayne's lips tightened as his eyes flickered to the row of unclaimed room keys behind her. "Fully booked?" he asked, his tone sharp but measured. "I find that hard to believe. I count at least 10 available rooms." Emma's composure faltered for a moment before she straightened, her chin lifting imperceptibly. "Those rooms are reserved for guests with confirmed bookings," she replied, her voice taking on a defensive edge. "We cannot accommodate walk-ins at this time." "Is that so?" Wayne asked, his gaze unwavering. "And what if I told you I had a reservation?" Emma blinked, her mind racing to recall any such booking. She quickly pulled up the reservation system on her computer, her fingers clicking over the keyboard. "I don't see a reservation under your name, sir." "You haven't even asked for my name yet," Wayne pointed out, his voice calm but piercing. Emma froze, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. Before she could respond, the supervisor, Greg Parker, approached, his broad frame exuding authority. He placed a firm hand on the counter and addressed Emma without acknowledging Wayne. "Is there a problem here?" Emma seized the opportunity. "This gentleman is asking for a room, but as I explained, we are fully booked." Wayne turned to Greg, his expression unreadable. "I'd like to speak to the manager." Greg scoffed, folding his arms across his chest. "The manager isn't available at this hour, but I can assure you we don't have any rooms for someone in your situation." "My situation?" Wayne repeated, his voice dropping to a dangerous calm. Greg's lips curled into a faint smirk. "Let's not make a scene, sir. There's a motel a few blocks away that might be more suited to your needs." A ripple of discomfort spread through the lobby as guests nearby pretended not to listen. Wayne's fists clenched at his sides, but he forced himself to relax, taking a step back. His gaze moved between Emma and Greg, noting every detail. The way Emma's fingers tapped nervously against the keyboard. The way Greg's smirk widened as he asserted his dominance. "Very well," Wayne said at last, his voice even. "I'll leave, for now." He turned on his heel, the weight of their judgment pressing heavy against his back. But as he walked toward the service entrance, his mind raced with plans. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Behind the counter, Emma let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "That was awkward," she muttered, glancing at Greg. Greg chuckled, leaning casually against the counter. "People like him don't belong here. Let security know to keep an eye on the entrances. I don't want him sneaking back in." Unbeknownst to them, Wayne paused just outside the door, the rain mixing with the heat of his rising anger. He glanced back at the glowing sign of the Blakewood Hotel, his jaw tightening. They would learn soon enough, every last one of them. The rain had eased into a steady drizzle as Wayne Blake walked down the darkened alley that led to the service entrance of the Blakewood Hotel. His steps were slow, deliberate, his thoughts a swirling storm of frustration and resolve. He didn't look back toward the grand entrance. There was no need. The faces of Emma Whitmore and Greg Parker were etched in his memory. Disdain and arrogance captured perfectly. Wayne pushed through the metal door at the rear of the building, the clang echoing through the dimly lit service hallway. The scent of detergent and faint cooking oils hung in the air, a stark contrast to the floral perfume of the main lobby. He shook the rain off his coat and took a moment to steady himself. He heard voices echoing from further down the corridor. Workers in stained aprons and uniforms were busy with the evening's tasks, their chatter blending with the hum of industrial machines. Wayne's presence went mostly unnoticed until one voice cut through the noise. "Hey, you can't be back here." The voice belonged to a burly security guard named Hank, whose broad shoulders filled the narrow hallway as he approached. Hank's face was stern, but there was no malice in his eyes, just the firm resolve of someone following orders. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Wayne said, his voice calm yet resolute. "I need to speak to someone." "Someone like who?" Hank asked, folding his arms. "This is staff only. If you're lost, you need to leave." Before Wayne could answer, a woman's voice interrupted. "Hank, what's going on?" The voice belonged to Tiffany Mitchell, the housekeeping manager. Her presence was striking, not for glamour, but for the quiet confidence she carried. She wore a simple uniform, her auburn hair tied back in a loose ponytail, and her eyes radiated warmth, even in the fluorescent light of the hallway. "Just someone wandering where they shouldn't be," Hank replied, turning to Tiffany. Tiffany's gaze shifted to Wayne, and for a moment she hesitated. There was something in his posture, in the way he held himself despite his worn appearance, that gave her pause. She stepped forward, brushing past Hank. "Are you okay, sir?" she asked, her tone kind but cautious. Wayne nodded, though the weariness in his expression was undeniable. "I just need a moment to sit. Maybe some water, if that's all right." Hank frowned, clearly unhappy with the idea, but Tiffany held up a hand. "It's fine, Hank. I'll handle it." Hank hesitated before muttering something under his breath and walking away. Tiffany gestured for Wayne to follow her. "Come on. There's a break room just down the hall." Wayne followed in silence, his boots squeaking faintly against the polished concrete floor. The break room was small and unremarkable. Worn chairs, a vending machine with flickering lights, and a counter cluttered with coffee mugs. Tiffany grabbed a bottle of water from the mini-fridge and handed it to Wayne. "Here," she said, watching as he took it gratefully. Wayne sank into one of the chairs, the weight of the day pressing heavily on his shoulders. Tiffany pulled up another chair, sitting across from him. She studied him for a moment, her head tilting slightly. "You don't look like someone who's lost," she said finally. "What's your story?" Wayne took a sip of the water, his eyes meeting hers. There was no judgment in her gaze, only curiosity and a hint of concern. He debated how much to share, but something about Tiffany's sincerity made him want to open up, at least partially. "I came here looking for a room," he said simply. "But the people at the front desk decided I didn't belong." Tiffany frowned. "Emma," she guessed, her tone tinged with frustration. "She's particular about appearances." "Particular," Wayne repeated with a dry chuckle. "That's one way to put it." Tiffany sighed, leaning back in her chair. "I'm sorry you went through that. It's not how we should treat anyone, regardless of anything, really." Her words were genuine, and Wayne found himself nodding. "It's not your fault," he said, though his jaw tightened at the memory of Emma's dismissive tone. "But it's a problem, a big one." Tiffany hesitated, sensing the weight behind his words. "If you're looking for another hotel, I can help you find one. There's a place a few blocks away. Not as fancy, but they're good people." Wayne shook his head. "I'll figure something out, but I appreciate the offer." Before Tiffany could respond, the door to the break room swung open and Hank reappeared, his expression grim. "Hey, Tiffany, Greg's looking for you. Wants to know what's taking so long." Tiffany's shoulders stiffened and she glanced at Wayne apologetically. "I have to go." "Will you be all right here for a bit?" Wayne nodded. "I'll be fine." Tiffany stood, giving him one last look before leaving the room with Hank. As the door closed behind her, Wayne leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had seen enough. The Blakewood Hotel was everything he had feared it might become: superficial, cold, and disconnected from the values he had built it on. But there was something else. Tiffany's kindness, her willingness to help despite her busy schedule, was a glimmer of hope. It reminded him of why he had started this journey in the first place. He wasn't just here to expose flaws. He was here to find the people who still believed in treating others with dignity. Wayne finished his water and stood, his resolve hardening. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. He walked to the window, watching as the rain continued to fall over the city. The night was far from over, and the lessons were just beginning. The rain outside had slowed to a misty drizzle by the time Tiffany returned to the service corridor. Her thoughts raced as she replayed her brief encounter with the stranger who had seemed out of place, yet carried himself with an air of quiet determination. Something about him lingered in her mind, though she couldn't pinpoint exactly what. She passed Hank on her way to the supervisor's office, his stern expression barely softening when he saw her. "Greg's in a mood," Hank muttered as she walked by. "Careful." Tiffany nodded, her lips pressed into a thin line. She pushed open the door to the office and found Greg Parker standing at his desk, his hands planted firmly on the surface as he glared at a stack of reports. He barely glanced up when she entered. "Tiffany," he barked, "where the hell have you been? We've got VIP guests arriving tomorrow, and the staff schedule is a mess. Do you know how bad it'll look if we're understaffed when they show up?" "I was helping someone in the service area," Tiffany replied, her tone measured. She wasn't intimidated by Greg's bluster, though it took effort to maintain her composure. "A man came in looking for help. He was soaked from the rain and—" Greg cut her off with a scoff. "Let me guess. Some drifter? Homeless?" "Tiffany, we run a 5-star hotel, not a shelter." Her jaw tightened, but she forced herself to remain calm. "He wasn't homeless, Greg. He asked for a room and said he was turned away at the front desk." Greg straightened, his eyes narrowing. That was probably Emma's call, and it was the right one. "Do you have any idea how much it would damage our image to let someone like that stay here? The guests would complain. They'd think we've lowered our standards." "Or," Tiffany countered, her voice steady but firm, "they might appreciate seeing someone treated with dignity, regardless of how they look." Greg's face darkened, and for a moment the tension in the room was suffocating. Then he laughed, a sharp, humorless sound that grated against Tiffany's nerves. "You're too soft, Tiffany. That's your problem. This is a business. We cater to a specific clientele, and they expect a certain caliber of guest." Tiffany stared at him, disbelief simmering beneath her calm exterior. "And what about the caliber of the staff? Shouldn't we be held to a higher standard too?" Greg's eyes flashed with irritation. He opened his mouth to respond, but a knock at the door interrupted him. They both turned as Jake Reynolds, the young bellboy, poked his head inside. "Sorry to interrupt," Jake said hesitantly, his gaze flicking between the two of them. "I just thought you should know. That guy from earlier, he's still here." Greg's expression twisted into a scowl. "What do you mean, he's still here?" Jake stepped fully into the room, shifting nervously on his feet. "I saw him in the service area a few minutes ago. He was talking to some of the staff." Greg let out a frustrated sigh, grabbing his radio from the desk. "Unbelievable. I'll take care of this myself." Tiffany's stomach knotted as she watched Greg storm out of the office, barking orders into his radio. Jake lingered by the door, his brow furrowed. "Something about that guy felt off," Jake said quietly. "Not in a bad way, though. He didn't seem like the kind of person who's lost or desperate. He had this presence." Tiffany nodded slowly. "I know what you mean. There's something about him that doesn't add up." Jake glanced toward the hallway. "You think we should tell someone? The manager, maybe?" "Not yet," Tiffany replied, her mind racing. "Let's see what happens." Meanwhile, Greg was making his way down the service corridor, his frustration mounting with every step. He found Wayne standing near the loading dock, speaking with a few workers who had gathered around him. They seemed captivated by whatever he was saying, their laughter echoing faintly in the air. "All right, that's enough," Greg barked, his voice cutting through the moment like a knife. The workers scattered, their expressions turning wary as Greg approached. He stopped in front of Wayne, towering over him with a look of barely restrained contempt. "I don't know who you think you are," Greg began, his tone laced with authority, "but you've worn out your welcome. This isn't a charity, and we don't have time for—" Wayne held up a hand, silencing him with a calm yet commanding gesture. "Mr. Parker, isn't it?" he asked, his voice steady and measured. "Do you always speak to people this way?" Greg blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Wayne replied, his gaze unwavering. Is this how you treat everyone who doesn't fit your idea of what belongs here? Or am I a special case? Greg's face reddened, his composure slipping. You're not a guest. You're trespassing. If you don't leave right now, I'll have security escort you out. Wayne's expression didn't change, but there was a quiet intensity in his eyes that made Greg falter. You can try, Wayne said evenly, but I'd advise against it. The tension in the air was palpable, the silence stretching as Greg weighed his options. Before he could respond, the sound of approaching footsteps broke the moment. They both turned to see Tiffany hurrying toward them, her expression a mixture of determination and concern. Greg, she said quickly, stepping between the two men, this isn't the way to handle this. Greg threw up his hands in exasperation. Stay out of this, Tiffany. It's not your problem. It is my problem, she shot back, her voice firm. We're supposed to treat people with respect no matter who they are. Greg stared at her, his mouth opening and closing as he struggled for a retort. Before he could find one, Wayne spoke. She's right, he said quietly. You'd do well to listen to her. Greg's face twisted with anger, but he said nothing. The standoff was interrupted by the crackle of his radio, a voice summoning him back to the front desk. He gave Wayne one last glare before turning on his heel and stalking off. Tiffany let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. I'm sorry about that, she said, turning to Wayne. Are you all right? Wayne nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. I'm fine. Thank you for stepping in. She hesitated, studying him for a moment. You're not just here for a room, are you? Wayne's smile widened slightly, but he said nothing. The silence between them was heavy with unspoken truths, and Tiffany felt a strange sense of anticipation. Whoever this man was, she knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going anywhere. The rain returned in heavier waves as the night deepened, the sound a steady percussion against the windows of the Blakewood Hotel. In the service area, Tiffany found herself pacing back and forth, her thoughts consumed by the stranger who had caused such a stir. Wayne. He had introduced himself only briefly, and yet his presence lingered, heavy and enigmatic. Her thoughts were interrupted when her phone buzzed with a message from Daniel, her husband. I'm waiting outside, it read. She smiled faintly at the text, grateful for his steady presence in her life. But even as she prepared to leave, she couldn't shake the feeling that something about tonight wasn't finished. Tiffany made her way to the service entrance, her pace quickening as the rain continued to pour. Daniel's car, an old but well-maintained sedan, idled by the curb. The sight of him, his kind eyes and easy smile, eased the tension in her chest. Hey, love, Daniel greeted as she slid into the passenger seat, his tone warm despite the late hour. Rough shift? You could say that, Tiffany replied, leaning her head against the seat with a sigh. It's been eventful. Daniel chuckled softly as he put the car into gear. Eventful how? Before Tiffany could answer, she caught sight of a figure standing just beyond the entrance, partially obscured by the rain. It was Wayne, his coat pulled tightly around him as he leaned against the wall, looking impossibly weary, yet steadfast. Wait, Tiffany said suddenly. Stop the car. Daniel frowned but complied, pulling over a few feet ahead. Tiffany opened her door, the cold rain immediately soaking through her clothes as she stepped out. She hurried back to the service entrance, her voice carrying over the sound of the storm. Wayne, she called. The man turned slowly, his expression guarded. For a moment, Tiffany hesitated. There was something in his eyes, something unspoken, yet deeply resolute. She pushed past her uncertainty and gestured toward the car. You shouldn't stay out here, she said. It's pouring. Come with us. We can drop you somewhere. Wayne hesitated, his gaze flickering between Tiffany and the car. I don't want to impose. You're not, Tiffany insisted, her voice firm. "Please, let us help." Wayne studied her for a moment longer before nodding. "All right. Thank you." Tiffany led him to the car, where Daniel raised his eyebrows in silent question. She gave him a reassuring look as Wayne climbed into the back seat, his presence filling the small space with an air of quiet intensity. "Daniel, this is Wayne," Tiffany said, settling back into her seat. "Wayne, my husband, Daniel." Daniel turned slightly, offering a friendly nod. "Nice to meet you, Wayne. Looks like you've had a rough night." "You could say that," Wayne replied, his voice low but steady. "Thanks for the ride." "No problem," Daniel said with a smile. "Where are we taking you?" Wayne hesitated, his gaze dropping to the worn leather of the car seat. "I haven't figured that out yet." Tiffany glanced at him in the rearview mirror, her concern deepening. "Do you have anywhere to go? Family? Friends?" Wayne shook his head slightly. "Not tonight." The weight of his words hung in the air, thick and heavy. Tiffany exchanged a glance with Daniel, her husband's brow furrowing in thought. "Well," Daniel said after a moment, "you're welcome to crash at our place. It's not much, but it's dry and warm." Wayne looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "I couldn't. You've already done enough." "It's not up for debate," Tiffany said firmly, turning in her seat to face him. "You need a place to stay, and we have one. End of discussion." For a moment Wayne said nothing, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded, his voice quiet. "Thank you." The drive to their small home on the outskirts of the city was quiet, but not uncomfortable. Daniel filled the silence with light-hearted anecdotes, his humor easing the tension in the car. Even Wayne found himself chuckling softly at one point, the sound surprising even to him. When they arrived, Tiffany led Wayne inside, her heart aching at the sight of his obvious exhaustion. The house was modest but cozy, its worn furniture and warm lighting offering a stark contrast to the cold, impersonal grandeur of the Blakewood Hotel. "You can take the couch," Tiffany said, grabbing a blanket from the linen closet. "It's not much, but—" "It's perfect," Wayne interrupted, his voice sincere. "Thank you, both of you." Daniel grinned, clapping Wayne on the shoulder. "Make yourself at home. Tiffany's a great cook, but I'm the one who makes the best coffee. You'll see tomorrow." Tiffany rolled her eyes, laughing softly. "He's not wrong about the coffee. Now get some rest." Wayne nodded, settling onto the couch as Tiffany and Daniel retreated to their bedroom. For the first time in what felt like years, he allowed himself to relax. The kindness of strangers, of people like Tiffany and Daniel, reminded him of a truth he had almost forgotten. Not everyone judged based on appearances. The night stretched on, the rain continuing its steady rhythm against the windows. But inside there was warmth, a flicker of humanity that shone brighter than any chandelier. Wayne closed his eyes, the weight of the day finally giving way to the pull of sleep. Yet in the back of his mind, plans began to take shape. Tomorrow, he would return to the hotel. Tomorrow, he would confront the flaws that had taken root in his business. And tomorrow, the real lessons would begin. The morning light filtered through the modest curtains of Tiffany and Daniel's home, casting a warm glow over the small living room. Wayne stirred on the couch, the scent of freshly brewed coffee nudging him out of a surprisingly restful sleep. For a moment, he lay still, taking in the unfamiliar comfort of his surroundings. The quiet hum of domestic life filled the air, a faint clatter of dishes, Daniel's low voice humming a tune in the kitchen. It was a world away from the sterile opulence of the Blakewood Hotel. "Morning," Tiffany greeted as she entered the living room, her voice soft but cheerful. She carried a steaming mug of coffee, which she placed on the small table beside the couch. "I hope you slept okay." Wayne sat up, running a hand through his hair. Better than I've slept in weeks, he admitted, offering her a faint smile. Thank you, Tiffany, for everything. She waved off his gratitude with a shrug, but there was warmth in her expression. You're welcome. And Daniel's coffee is the real lifesaver around here. He insists it's his superpower. As if on cue, Daniel appeared in the doorway, carrying another mug and grinning. Superpower? Please, it's a gift from the coffee gods. Wayne chuckled, accepting the mug. The easy camaraderie between Tiffany and Daniel was a balm to his frayed nerves, a reminder of the simple humanity that so often got lost in the cutthroat world of luxury business. So, what's the plan for today? Daniel asked, settling into a chair across from Wayne. Wayne hesitated, his gaze dropping to the dark liquid swirling in his cup. I need to go back, he said finally, his voice quiet but resolute. To the hotel? Tiffany asked, her brow furrowing. He nodded. There are things I need to address, things I've let go unchecked for too long. Tiffany and Daniel exchanged a glance, their unspoken understanding passing between them. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You've got a score to settle, don't you? Not a score, Wayne replied, his tone measured. A lesson. Tiffany frowned, leaning against the arm of the couch. Do you think they'll listen? People like Greg, they don't exactly take well to being challenged. Wayne's eyes sharpened, a flicker of determination in their depths. They'll listen, he said simply. Or they'll learn the hard way. The room fell silent for a moment, the weight of his words settling over them. Then Daniel stood, clapping his hands together. Well, if you're going to teach them a lesson, you'll need reinforcements. Tiffany and I are with you. Wayne looked up, surprised. You don't have to do that. We know, Tiffany said, her voice firm. But someone needs to stand up to people like Greg. And if you're doing it, we're doing it too. Wayne studied them, their faces set with quiet resolve. For a moment he felt the unfamiliar sting of gratitude. These were people who had nothing to gain and everything to lose, yet they stood beside him without hesitation. All right, he said finally. Let's do this. The three of them arrived at the Blakewood Hotel just before noon. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with the lingering chill of the storm. Wayne insisted on entering through the service entrance, much to Tiffany's unease. Are you sure about this? She asked as they walked down the familiar hallway. Greg won't be happy to see you. That's the point, Wayne replied, his tone calm but unyielding. The staff glanced curiously at them as they passed, their whispers rippling through the corridor. It didn't take long for word to reach Greg, who stormed into the hallway with the ferocity of a thundercloud. You've got to be kidding me, he growled, his eyes narrowing as they landed on Wayne. Didn't I tell you to stay out of here? Wayne stopped, his gaze steady as he faced Greg. And I told you this wasn't over. Greg's lips twisted into a sneer. You've got some nerve, walking back in here like you own the place. Wayne's expression didn't falter. Funny you should say that. The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Greg blinked, his bluster faltering for the first time. What's that supposed to mean? Before Wayne could answer, Tiffany stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tension. It means you've been treating people like garbage without realizing who you're talking to. Greg glared at her, but there was uncertainty in his eyes now. What are you talking about? Wayne stepped closer, his presence commanding. You see, Greg, this hotel isn't just a business to me. It's a reflection of everything I stand for, or at least it's supposed to be. But somewhere along the way, people like you turned it into something I barely recognize. Realization dawned on Greg's face, his complexion paling. You're the owner, Wayne finished, his voice sharp and unyielding. The man whose name is on every key card, every plaque, every contract you signed, and you... He took a step closer, his eyes blazing. "Have failed me." The hallway fell silent, the murmurs of the staff dying instantly. Greg opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. For once, he was utterly speechless. Wayne turned to the gathered staff, his voice carrying through the corridor. "I came here to see how this hotel operates when no one's watching. And what I saw was disappointing." His gaze swept over the group, landing on Emma, who had appeared at the end of the hallway, her face stricken. Disrespect, arrogance, a complete lack of empathy. That's not what the Blakewood stands for, and it's not what I stand for. Tiffany and Daniel watched in silence, their hearts pounding as Wayne continued. His words were like a reckoning, each one landing with precision and weight. "Things are going to change," Wayne said, his tone resolute. "Starting today, those who want to stay, those who are willing to do better, will have that chance. But for those who think they're above treating people with decency—" He turned back to Greg, his voice dropping to a deadly calm. "You're done." The words hit like a thunderclap, the staff collectively holding their breath. Greg's face flushed with anger and humiliation, but he said nothing. He knew there was no argument to be made. Wayne took a step back, his posture firm but not unkind. "This isn't just about me," he said, addressing the staff once more. "It's about all of us. If we want to be the best, we have to be better. Together." The room remained silent for a beat longer before Tiffany spoke, her voice steady and clear. "And if he believes in us, then maybe we should believe in ourselves too." A murmur of agreement rippled through the staff, tentative at first but growing stronger. Wayne nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The storm wasn't over, but the first rays of light had begun to break through. The Blakewood Hotel lobby hummed with its usual midday activity. Guests glided across the marble floors, bellboys maneuvered luggage carts with precision, and the scent of freshly cut flowers wafted through the air. But amidst the elegance, a palpable tension lingered, carried from the service corridor to the heart of the hotel like an invisible thread. Wayne Blake stepped into the main lobby, his presence commanding but understated. His worn coat and rugged appearance stood out like a blemish against the otherwise pristine surroundings. The staff behind the reception desk froze mid-motion, their polite smiles faltering as they recognized the man who had caused whispers and speculation for days. Emma Whitmore, the receptionist whose haughty dismissal had set the wheels of this reckoning in motion, was the first to react. Her cheeks flushed as she glanced toward her supervisor, Greg Parker, now relegated to lingering at the far corner of the room. His posture was stiff, his jaw clenched, a stark contrast to the usual smugness he exuded. Wayne's gaze swept across the room, not with judgment, but with purpose. He was taking stock, not just of the opulence, but of the people, their reactions, their attitudes, their quiet fears and hopes. Beside him, Tiffany stood as steady as a lighthouse, her expression resolute. Daniel lingered a few steps behind, his presence unassuming but supportive. Emma swallowed hard, finally stepping forward to greet him. Her voice, once clipped and cold, now carried an unsteady humility. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome back." Wayne tilted his head slightly, his expression neutral. "Good afternoon, Emma." The silence between them stretched, heavy with unspoken words. Emma fidgeted, her hands clasping the edge of the counter. I want to apologize for the way I treated you before. It was wrong, and I—" "Stop," Wayne interrupted gently but firmly. The single word carried enough weight to silence her instantly. "We'll get to that. But first, I need to speak with your manager." Emma's eyes darted to the far end of the desk, where Rachel Morgan, the general manager, stood observing the exchange with a furrowed brow. Rachel was a poised woman in her mid-40s, her tailored suit and polished demeanor projecting authority. She approached with measured steps, her hands folded neatly in front of her. "Mr. Blake," Rachel said, her voice calm but tinged with unease. "It's a pleasure to see you. I wasn't aware you were visiting." "That's the point," Wayne replied, his tone measured but firm. "I wanted to see how things operate when I'm not expected." Rachel's face betrayed a flicker of discomfort, but she recovered quickly. "I understand, and I can assure you that we run a tight ship here. If there's been an issue—" "There have been several," Wayne cut in, his voice sharpening slightly. He stepped closer, his presence filling the space between them. "And I think it's time we addressed them." Rachel nodded, her professionalism intact even as unease crept into her expression. "Of course, let's discuss this in my office." "No," Wayne said, his voice ringing clearly through the lobby. Heads turned subtly, guests and staff alike pretending not to listen, but hanging on every word. "We'll discuss it here, where everyone can hear." Rachel hesitated, her gaze flickering to the curious onlookers. "Mr. Blake, with all due respect, this might be better handled in private." "With all due respect," Wayne interrupted, his voice unwavering, "this isn't just about you or me. It's about everyone in this hotel. So we'll have this conversation right here." The firmness in his tone left no room for argument. Rachel straightened, a flicker of resignation crossing her face. "Very well." Wayne turned slightly, addressing the gathered staff and guests alike. "This hotel was built on the principle of hospitality, real hospitality. That means treating every person who walks through those doors with dignity and respect, no matter who they are or what they look like." His gaze swept the room, landing briefly on Emma, then on Greg, who avoided his eyes. But somewhere along the way, we lost sight of that. We started caring more about appearances than people. We let arrogance and judgment take the place of kindness and empathy. The room was utterly silent, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. Wayne's voice softened, but his words carried even greater weight. "I've spent the last few days seeing this hotel from the outside, from the perspective of someone who doesn't fit your idea of what belongs. And what I saw was disappointing." He turned to Rachel, his expression both stern and searching. "I trusted you to uphold the values this hotel was built on, but instead I found staff who judge, supervisors who belittle, and a culture that prioritizes image over integrity." Rachel's face tightened, but she held his gaze. "I understand your concerns, Mr. Blake, and I take full responsibility. If there are changes to be made, I will see to it personally." "Good," Wayne said, his tone softening slightly. "Because changes are coming, and they start now." He turned to Emma, his gaze steady. "Emma, you made a mistake, a big one, but mistakes are opportunities to learn. If you're willing, I want you to spend the next month working in the service department. No fancy clothes, no makeup, just hard work alongside the people who keep this place running." Emma's eyes widened, and she opened her mouth to protest, but the weight of Wayne's words silenced her. She nodded reluctantly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I understand." Wayne's gaze shifted to Greg, whose defiance was written all over his face. "Greg, your behavior has been unacceptable. You've shown nothing but arrogance and disrespect, not just to me, but to the staff and guests alike. Effective immediately, you're relieved of your position." Greg's face flushed with anger, but before he could respond, Wayne held up a hand. "You're welcome to reapply for a position here after some time away, but for now, you need to leave." The room remained tense, the weight of Wayne's decisions hanging heavily in the air. He turned back to the staff, his voice steady but filled with resolve. "This isn't just about holding people accountable. It's about rebuilding what we've lost: kindness, respect, empathy. Those aren't just words, they're the foundation of everything we do here. The staff exchanged glances, a mix of uncertainty and hope flickering in their eyes. Wayne's gaze landed briefly on Tiffany and Daniel, who stood quietly at the edge of the room. Their presence was a reminder of the goodness he had found amidst the disappointment. "We can be better," Wayne said, his voice softening, "but it starts with us, all of us." The room remained silent for a moment longer before a quiet murmur of agreement rippled through the staff. Wayne nodded, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. The storm wasn't over, but the first steps toward rebuilding had been taken. As the tension eased, Wayne turned toward Tiffany and Daniel, his eyes filled with gratitude. "Let's go," he said quietly. And together, they walked out of the lobby, leaving behind a room forever changed. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the Seattle skyline, Wayne Blake found himself standing in the heart of his city, watching the distant glow of the Blakewood Hotel. He had spent years building that empire, crafting every detail with precision and care, only to see it corrupted by arrogance and neglect. Tonight he felt the weight of it all, a mix of regret and determination pressing against his chest. Tiffany and Daniel stood beside him, silent but steadfast. They didn't need to speak. Their presence was enough. Wayne's mind churned with the events of the day, replaying each confrontation, each revelation. Yet amidst the turmoil, he found clarity. This wasn't just about his hotel. It was about the people within it, the lives it touched, and the principles it was meant to uphold. Finally, Daniel broke the silence, his voice low but firm. "You did the right thing today. It couldn't have been easy, but it was necessary." Wayne nodded, though his gaze remained fixed on the distant building. "It's just the beginning. Changing a culture like that. It'll take time." "Time," Tiffany said softly, "and people who believe in what you're trying to do." Wayne turned to her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "Like you?" She met his gaze, her expression resolute. "Exactly." The sound of approaching footsteps drew their attention. A young man hurried toward them, his face flushed with urgency. It was Jake Reynolds, the bellboy who had observed everything from the shadows of the lobby. He stopped a few feet away, catching his breath before speaking. "Mr. Blake," Jake began, his voice laced with nervous energy. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought you should know. Greg didn't leave quietly." Wayne's eyes narrowed, a flicker of concern crossing his face. "What do you mean?" Jake hesitated, glancing at Tiffany and Daniel before continuing. "He's been talking to some of the staff, stirring things up, saying you're out of touch, that you don't understand how the business really works. He's trying to turn people against you." The tension in the air thickened, and Tiffany's fists clenched at her sides. "That man doesn't know when to quit." Wayne held up a hand, his expression calm but his tone resolute. "It's all right, let him talk. The truth will reveal itself." "But what if he gets to the wrong people?" Jake asked, his voice tinged with worry. "Some of the staff, they're scared. They think siding with him might be safer." Wayne placed a hand on Jake's shoulder, his grip firm but reassuring. "Then it's up to us to show them they don't have to be afraid. That doing the right thing is worth the risk." Jake nodded, a flicker of determination replacing his uncertainty. "I'll do whatever I can to help." "Good," Wayne said. "But for now, go home. Rest. Tomorrow will be a long day." Jake hesitated, then nodded again before retreating into the night. As his footsteps faded, Wayne turned back to Tiffany and Daniel. "Greg's bitterness is predictable," Wayne said quietly, "but it's a reminder that we have to act fast. If we don't rebuild trust now, it'll be too late." Tiffany crossed her arms, her gaze steady. "Then what's the plan?" Wayne took a deep breath, his mind racing with possibilities. Tomorrow, we gather the staff. Everyone. I need to talk to them, not as their boss, but as someone who believes in what this hotel can be. And what if they don't listen? Daniel asked, his tone cautious. They will, Wayne said, his voice resolute. Because deep down, everyone wants to believe in something better. They just need to see that it's possible. The next morning, the Blakewood Hotel buzzed with an air of uncertainty. Staff members whispered among themselves, their glances darting toward the grand conference room where Wayne had summoned them all. The tension was palpable, a mix of curiosity, fear, and skepticism hanging in the air. Inside the conference room, Wayne stood at the front, his presence commanding but not overbearing. Tiffany and Daniel stood to one side, offering quiet support, while Rachel Morgan sat nearby, her expression a blend of professionalism and quiet reflection. The room filled slowly, staff members taking their seats with cautious glances. Emma entered last, her face pale, but her posture determined. She avoided Wayne's gaze, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When the last seat was filled, Wayne stepped forward, letting the weight of the moment settle before he spoke. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice calm but steady. "I know many of you have questions. About me, about what happened yesterday, about what comes next, and I'm here to answer them." He paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "But first, I need to say this. I'm not here to tear anyone down. I'm not here to punish or humiliate. I'm here because I believe in this hotel. I believe in the people who work here, and I believe we can be better." The room remained silent, but the tension began to shift, curiosity replacing fear. "I've heard the whispers," Wayne continued. "I know some of you are worried about what these changes mean, and I won't lie to you, change is hard, but it's also necessary, because what I saw over the past few days, it wasn't the Blakewood I built. It wasn't the Blakewood we can be." He stepped closer, his tone softening. "This hotel isn't just a building. It's a place where people come to feel welcome, to feel cared for, to feel valued, and that starts with us, with how we treat each other, how we treat our guests, and how we carry ourselves every day." His words hung in the air, resonating deeply with the staff. Even those who had been skeptical felt a flicker of something they hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Wayne turned to Emma, his gaze steady, but not unkind. "Emma, you've already shown that you're willing to learn from your mistakes. That's all I ask of anyone here, to learn, to grow, and to strive for something better." Emma nodded, her voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you." Wayne's attention shifted to the rest of the staff. "For those of you who feel unsure, who feel like this is asking too much, I understand, and I promise you I'll be here every step of the way. But you have to be willing to take that step with me." A murmur rippled through the room, staff members exchanging glances. Slowly but surely, hands began to raise, tentative at first, then more confidently. The murmurs grew into quiet affirmations, a collective agreement taking shape. Wayne smiled, the weight in his chest lifting slightly. "Thank you," he said, his voice filled with quiet emotion. "This is just the beginning. But together, we'll make the Blakewood the place it was always meant to be." As the staff began to file out, their expressions a mix of determination and cautious optimism, Tiffany approached Wayne, her smile warm. "You did it," she said softly. Wayne shook his head, his expression thoughtful. "We did it, and now the real work begins." The rain had returned by the evening, a soft drizzle that tapped against the large glass windows of the Blakewood Hotel like a steady metronome. The conference room was empty now, its earlier tension replaced by an almost serene quiet. Wayne stood alone at the front of the room, staring out into the misty cityscape, his hands resting lightly on the back of a chair. He replayed the events of the day in his mind, the faces of his staff lingering in his thoughts, the mixture of hope, fear, and uncertainty in their eyes. They were trying, he could see that. But years of complacency and mismanagement weren't going to dissolve overnight. The path ahead was long, and the burden of leading them down it felt heavier with each passing moment. Behind him, the door creaked open. Wayne didn't turn, but he heard the familiar footsteps and the soft voice that followed. "You've been standing there for over an hour," Tiffany said gently, stepping inside. "You should take a break." Wayne smiled faintly, but didn't move. "Breaks don't rebuild hotels, Tiffany." "No," she agreed, moving closer, "but they help rebuild people. And that's what you're really doing, isn't it?" Wayne glanced at her, her quiet presence grounding him. "What do you think, Tiffany? Can we do it? Can we really turn this place around?" She didn't answer immediately, instead stepping up beside him and looking out at the rain-soaked city. "It won't be easy," she admitted. "Some people will fight you. Others will give up before they even try. But if today showed me anything, it's that you have the power to inspire people, and that's half the battle." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment Wayne allowed himself to believe them. But the sound of hurried footsteps in the hallway broke the quiet, and both turned as Jake Reynolds burst into the room, his face pale and his breathing labored. "Mr. Blake," Jake gasped, doubling over to catch his breath. "You need to come to the lobby, now." Wayne's brow furrowed, a sense of unease settling over him. "What's going on?" "It's Greg," Jake said, his voice tight. "He's back, and he's not alone." The lobby was a stark contrast to its usual elegance. A group of people, mostly disgruntled former employees, stood clustered near the entrance, their voices raised in a mixture of anger and defiance. At the center of the commotion stood Greg Parker, his posture as rigid as ever, a smirk playing on his lips as he gestured toward the staff who had gathered to watch. "You really think this guy cares about you?" Greg barked, his voice carrying across the room. "He's not here to help. He's here to take control, to make himself look good while the rest of you get thrown under the bus." The crowd murmured uneasily, their uncertainty feeding the tension in the room. Wayne entered with Tiffany and Jake just as Greg's voice rose again. "He doesn't know what it's like to be one of us," Greg continued, his tone dripping with derision. "To work long hours for barely enough to get by. He's lived his whole life at the top, looking down on people like us." "That's enough," Wayne's voice rang out, sharp and commanding. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to him. Greg's smirk faltered for a moment before he regained his composure. "Wayne Blake," Greg said mockingly, spreading his arms, "the man of the hour, come to grace us with another lecture about kindness and empathy?" Wayne's gaze was steady, his expression unreadable. "I'm here to tell the truth, Greg. Something you seem to have trouble with." Greg scoffed, folding his arms. "Oh, this should be good. Let's hear it." Wayne took a step forward, addressing the room rather than Greg. "He's right about one thing," he began, his voice calm but resolute. "I don't know what it's like to be one of you. I've never struggled to make ends meet. I've never had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. I've been fortunate, privileged even." The staff exchanged uncertain glances, and Greg's smirk returned, but Wayne continued before he could interject. "But that doesn't mean I don't care," Wayne said, his voice rising slightly. "It doesn't mean I don't see the hard work you put in every day, the sacrifices you make, the challenges you face. And it doesn't mean I won't fight for you, because I will. I already am." The room was silent, the weight of his words settling over the crowd. Wayne turned to Greg, his gaze sharp. "You, on the other hand, have done nothing but tear people down," Wayne said, his tone cutting. "You've used their fears and insecurities to manipulate them, to serve your own agenda. You don't care about these people, Greg. You care about yourself." Greg's face reddened, his composure slipping. Don't act like you're some kind of hero, Wayne. You're just a rich man trying to play savior. I'm not a hero, Wayne replied evenly, and I don't pretend to be. But I am someone who believes in this hotel and the people who make it what it is. That's more than I can say for you. The tension in the room reached its peak, the air crackling with unspoken emotions. Then a voice broke the silence. He's right. All eyes turned to Tiffany, who stepped forward, her expression resolute. Wayne has spent the last few days listening to us, learning about what we go through. He didn't have to do that, but he did, and he's willing to do more. Can any of you honestly say Greg would do the same? The room remained silent, the staff shifting uncomfortably. Greg opened his mouth to retort, but another voice cut him off. Enough, Rachel Morgan said, stepping into the fray. Her presence was commanding, her tone leaving no room for argument. This isn't the place for this kind of behavior. Greg, you're trespassing. Leave now, or I'll have security escort you out. Greg hesitated, his confidence finally cracking. He looked around the room, searching for support, but found none. With a growl of frustration, he turned and stormed out, his followers trailing behind him. The tension in the room eased, replaced by a tentative sense of relief. Wayne turned back to the staff, his expression softening. I know this isn't easy, he said, his voice gentle but firm. Change never is. But if we work together, if we trust each other, we can build something we're all proud of. Something worth fighting for. A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, growing steadily louder. Tiffany stepped up beside Wayne, a faint smile on her lips. You did it, she said quietly. Wayne shook his head, his gaze sweeping the room. We did it, and we're just getting started. The Blakewood Hotel awoke to an unusual energy the following morning. The whispers and uncertainty of the past few days had settled into something different, something charged with anticipation. Staff members moved through the hallways with purpose, their usual routines tinged with a cautious optimism. Though the events of the previous evening lingered like an unspoken memory, there was a collective sense that the tides were finally shifting. Wayne Blake arrived early, his worn coat and thoughtful expression unchanged. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the pale morning sun. As he stepped into the lobby, the subtle sound of murmured greetings followed him, hesitant but sincere. He nodded in acknowledgement, his focus sharp as he made his way to the manager's office. Rachel Morgan was already there, standing by the large window that overlooked the bustling city below. Her posture was rigid, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. But when she turned to face Wayne, her expression softened. You made quite the impression yesterday, she said, her voice neutral but tinged with a hint of admiration. Not everyone was impressed, Wayne replied, his tone even. Greg won't be the last person to challenge what we're trying to do. No, he won't, Rachel agreed, moving to sit behind her desk. But that's the price of change, isn't it? Wayne nodded, stepping closer. The staff meeting today, it's not just about talking. It's about setting a new tone. They need to see that this isn't just words. Rachel studied him for a moment before leaning forward, resting her elbows on the desk. Do you really think they'll follow you, after everything that's happened? They don't have to follow me, Wayne said firmly. They just need to believe in what we're building. And that starts with trust. Rachel held his gaze for a long moment before nodding slowly. All right, let's see what you've got. The staff meeting was held in the grand ballroom, a space usually reserved for weddings and corporate events. The room was large enough to accommodate everyone, from the housekeeping staff to the front desk employees and even the kitchen team. Tiffany and Daniel arrived early, helping to arrange chairs and ensure the space felt welcoming rather than intimidating. As the staff began to file in, the air buzzed with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Wayne stood near the stage, his hands clasped behind his back, observing the faces around him. He saw doubt in some, hope in others, and a quiet resilience in many. When the last seat was filled, Wayne stepped onto the small stage, his movements deliberate and unhurried. The murmurs quieted as all eyes turned to him, the weight of their attention palpable. He let the silence linger for a moment, his gaze sweeping the room before he spoke. "Good morning," he began, his voice steady but warm. "I want to start by thanking all of you for being here. I know the past few days haven't been easy, and I appreciate your willingness to give me this time." He paused, his expression thoughtful. "When I first built the Blakewood, I had a vision, a place where people could find more than just luxury. I wanted them to feel a sense of belonging, of care. But somewhere along the way, we lost that. And that's on me. I take full responsibility for not paying closer attention, for letting things slip." The room remained silent, the staff listening intently. Wayne's voice softened, taking on a more personal tone. "But today isn't about blame. It's about moving forward, together." He gestured toward the back of the room, where a large board displayed a new set of values, bold and unapologetic. Kindness, integrity, excellence. These words weren't just ideals, they were commitments. "We're going to rebuild this hotel," Wayne continued. "Not just the way it looks, but the way it feels. And that starts with each of us, with how we treat each other, how we treat our guests, and how we represent the Blakewood." His gaze landed on Emma, who sat near the middle of the room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "Emma," he said, his voice steady, "you've already taken the first step. You acknowledged your mistakes, and you're working to grow. That's all I ask of anyone here, to learn, to improve, and to strive for something better." Emma's cheeks flushed, but she nodded, her determination evident. Wayne's attention shifted to the rest of the staff, his tone taking on a firmer edge. "This isn't just about policies or procedures," he said. "It's about culture, about creating an environment where everyone, staff, guests, everyone, feels valued. And that takes all of us." The room remained silent, the weight of his words settling over the staff. Then, slowly, a hand raised near the back. It was Jake Reynolds, his expression earnest. "What if—" "Some people don't want to change," Jake asked hesitantly. "What if they fight against it?" Wayne met his gaze, his voice resolute. "Then they'll have a choice. They can either be part of the solution or step aside. But one way or another, this hotel will move forward." The firmness in his tone left no room for doubt. The staff exchanged glances, their expressions a mix of contemplation and quiet resolve. Wayne stepped down from the stage, moving closer to the group. "I know it won't be easy," he said, his voice softening. "Change never is. But I promise you this, I'll be here every step of the way. I'll listen, I'll support you, and I'll do everything in my power to make this a place we can all be proud of." A murmur of agreement rippled through the room, growing steadily louder. Tiffany, standing near the side, watched with quiet pride as the staff began to nod, their uncertainty giving way to determination. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, his smile mirroring her own. As the meeting drew to a close, Wayne felt a faint but steady sense of hope. The road ahead was long, but for the first time in a long time, he believed they could make it. Together. Later that evening, Wayne stood in the quiet of his office, the events of the day replaying in his mind. Tiffany entered, her expression thoughtful as she approached him. "You did good today," she said simply. Wayne glanced at her, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. "We did good." Tiffany nodded, her gaze steady. "But it's just the beginning." Wayne's smile widened slightly, his determination shining through. That's exactly what makes it exciting. As the city lights glittered beyond the windows, Wayne felt a quiet confidence settle over him. The journey ahead would be challenging, but it was a challenge worth taking because some things were worth fighting for. The morning dawned crisp and clear, the kind of rare Seattle day when the sun broke through the usual grey. At the Blakewood Hotel, the rays filtered through the massive lobby windows, casting long, warm streaks across the marble floors. The staff moved with a new sense of purpose, their actions sharper, more deliberate. The previous day's meeting had planted a seed of possibility, and though doubt lingered in some corners, hope had begun to sprout. Wayne Blake arrived early, his coat neatly folded over one arm and a quiet determination etched on his face. He strode through the lobby, exchanging nods and brief greetings with employees who had grown accustomed to his unassuming presence. Today wasn't just another day. It was the day he'd put the new values into practice. As he entered the staff lounge, Tiffany was already there, leaning against the counter with a steaming cup of coffee in hand. She straightened when she saw him, offering a smile. "Ready for round 2?" she asked, her tone light but her eyes serious. "Always," Wayne replied, pouring himself a cup. He leaned against the counter beside her, his gaze distant. "How are they doing this morning?" "Better," Tiffany said thoughtfully. "I think yesterday helped. They're still nervous, but there's a shift. It's small, but it's there." Wayne nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. Small shifts lead to big changes. Before Tiffany could respond, the lounge door opened and Rachel Morgan stepped inside, her expression unreadable. She carried a folder under one arm, her stride purposeful. "Wayne," Rachel began, glancing briefly at Tiffany before focusing on him. "We have a situation." Wayne straightened, setting his coffee down. "What kind of situation?" "Guest complaint," Rachel said, handing him the folder. "A high-profile one. Sophia Williams, she's staying in the presidential suite. Apparently there was an incident last night with room service. She's demanding to speak with you." Wayne opened the folder, scanning the brief report. Sophia Williams, a wealthy philanthropist and frequent traveler, known for her high standards. According to the report, her dinner order had been delayed by over an hour, and when it finally arrived, it was cold and incorrect. He closed the folder, his jaw tightening. "Where is she now?" he asked. "In the lounge on the top floor," Rachel replied. "She's not happy." Wayne glanced at Tiffany, who raised an eyebrow. "Want backup?" she asked. He shook his head. "Number this one's on me." The top-floor lounge was an oasis of luxury, with sweeping views of the city and plush seating arranged to encourage relaxation. But there was nothing relaxed about Sophia Williams. She sat near the windows, her posture stiff and her expression cool. She was impeccably dressed, her tailored suit and polished heels exuding the effortless confidence of someone used to being in control. Wayne approached her with measured steps, his expression calm. "Ms. Williams," he said as he reached her table, "I'm Wayne Blake. Thank you for taking the time to meet with me." Sophia's eyes flicked to him, her gaze sharp and assessing. She gestured to the chair across from her. "Sit." Wayne complied, folding his hands on the table. "I understand there was an issue with your room service last night. I want to personally apologize for the inconvenience." Sophia's lips pressed into a thin line. "Inconvenience is putting it mildly, Mr. Blake. When I stay at a hotel like the Blakewood, I expect a certain level of service. What I received last night was unacceptable." Wayne nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You're absolutely right. That's not the standard we hold ourselves to, and I take full responsibility." Sophia leaned back slightly, her gaze narrowing. "Responsibility is one thing, action is another. What are you going to do about it?" Wayne didn't flinch. "First, I'd like to understand exactly what happened. I've already reviewed the initial report, but I want to hear your perspective." Sophia tilted her head slightly, her demeanor softening just a fraction. She recounted the incident in detail, her tone clipped but controlled. Wayne listened intently, nodding occasionally but never interrupting. When she finished, he let the silence linger for a moment before speaking. "Thank you for sharing that," he said. "It's clear we fell short, and I'm truly sorry. I'll make sure the staff involved receive additional training to ensure this doesn't happen again." Sophia studied him for a long moment, her sharp gaze searching his face. Finally, she spoke. "You're not what I expected." Wayne raised an eyebrow. "What did you expect?" "A polished executive in a designer suit, spouting rehearsed apologies," she replied bluntly. "Not someone who actually listens." Wayne smiled faintly. "Listening is the least I can do. And I mean what I said. We're committed to being better." Sophia nodded slowly, a hint of respect creeping into her expression. "I'll hold you to that." Wayne stood, extending a hand. "Thank you for bringing this to my attention. If there's anything else you need during your stay, please don't hesitate to reach out." Sophia shook his hand, her grip firm. "I'll keep that in mind." As Wayne turned to leave, Sophia's voice stopped him. "One more thing." He glanced back, his expression curious. "Yes?" "I've been to a lot of hotels," she said, her tone thoughtful. "Most of them care more about appearances than substance. But there's something different about you, about this place. Don't lose that." Wayne nodded, the weight of her words settling over him. "Thank you. I won't." Back in the staff lounge, Wayne found Tiffany and Rachel waiting. Tiffany raised an eyebrow as he walked in. "How'd it go?" "Better than expected," Wayne replied, his tone light. "She's tough but fair, and she gave us something to think about." Rachel frowned slightly. "What's that?" "That what sets us apart isn't just luxury. It's heart," Wayne said. "And that's what we need to focus on." Tiffany smiled, a quiet pride shining in her eyes. "I think we're on the right track." Wayne nodded, his determination renewed. The road ahead was still uncertain, but with every step, they were building something stronger, something worth fighting for. The Blakewood Hotel buzzed with a sense of momentum. The air carried a quiet hum of progress, a rhythm Wayne Blake was keenly attuned to. As he walked the halls that morning, he noticed subtle but significant changes. Staff greeted each other with renewed energy, the tense whispers replaced by smiles and short bursts of laughter. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. Wayne stopped near the elevators, his sharp eyes catching a small interaction at the front desk. Emma, the once aloof receptionist, was patiently assisting an elderly couple who seemed overwhelmed by the hotel's array of amenities. Her voice was calm, her gestures unhurried as she guided them through the check-in process. Wayne couldn't help but smile. Growth was never easy, but Emma was proving it was possible. As he stepped into the elevator, Tiffany joined him, her clipboard tucked under one arm. "You've got a packed schedule today," she said, scanning her notes. "Meeting with the kitchen staff, a review of the new guest services training, and, oh, Rachel wants an update on the repairs in the East Wing." Wayne smirked. "All that before lunch?" Tiffany shrugged, a wry smile playing on her lips. "You wanted to rebuild the hotel, remember? No one said it would be easy." The elevator dinged, and they stepped out onto the second floor, heading toward the staff meeting room. As they walked, Tiffany's tone grew more serious. "There's something else," she said. "Jake mentioned overhearing a few staff members talking about Greg." Wayne stopped, his expression tightening. "What about him?" Tiffany hesitated, her gaze steady. "He's been trying to stir up trouble again. He's reaching out to some of the staff who left after you confronted him. Word is he's planning something. Wayne's jaw clenched, but his voice remained calm. We knew he wouldn't go quietly. Do you know who he's been talking to? Tiffany shook her head. Not yet, but Jake's keeping an ear out. Wayne nodded, his mind already working through the possibilities. Let's deal with today's priorities first. Then we'll handle Greg. The meeting room was filled with the scents of freshly brewed coffee and baked goods, a small effort Wayne had insisted on to create a more inviting atmosphere for the staff. Around the table sat representatives from each department: housekeeping, front desk, kitchen, and maintenance. They were a mix of seasoned employees and newer hires, their expressions a blend of curiosity and caution. Wayne took his seat at the head of the table, his presence quiet but commanding. Tiffany sat to his left, her clipboard ready, while Rachel occupied the chair to his right, her professional demeanor as steady as ever. "Thank you all for being here," Wayne began, his voice warm but firm. "I know the past few weeks have been challenging, but I'm proud of the progress we've made. Today, I want to hear from you, your thoughts, your concerns, and your ideas for how we can continue moving forward." The room was silent for a moment, the staff exchanging uncertain glances. Then, to Wayne's surprise, Emma spoke up. "I just want to say," she began, her voice hesitant but sincere, "that I was wrong. About a lot of things. The way I treated people before, it wasn't right. And I'm sorry." Wayne nodded, his expression encouraging. "Thank you for saying that, Emma. Acknowledging our mistakes is one of the hardest and most important steps we can take." Emma smiled faintly, a flicker of relief crossing her face. Around the table, a few other staff members began to nod, their own expressions softening. Next, Jake spoke, his voice more confident than usual. "I think we're heading in the right direction, but there's still a lot of hesitation. Some people are worried about what'll happen if things don't work out." Wayne leaned forward, his gaze steady. "Change is always risky, Jake, but staying the same, letting things slide, that's even riskier. The only way we'll succeed is if we trust each other and commit to making this work." The room hummed with quiet agreement, the weight of Wayne's words settling over the group. As the discussion continued, ideas and suggestions began to flow more freely. The staff talked about everything from improving communication between departments to enhancing the guest experience with small, thoughtful touches. Wayne listened intently, his heart lifting as he saw their enthusiasm growing. By the end of the meeting, the room felt lighter, the staff departing with a sense of purpose. Wayne lingered for a moment, watching as the last few employees filed out. "They're starting to believe," Tiffany said softly, standing beside him. Wayne nodded, his voice thoughtful. "Belief is the first step. Now we need to show them results." That afternoon, Wayne made his way to the kitchen, where the scent of spices and fresh bread filled the air. The kitchen staff bustled around him, their movements precise and efficient. At the center of it all was Chef Marco, a gruff but passionate man who had been with the Blakewood since its inception. "Mr. Blake," Marco greeted, his tone respectful but brisk. "What brings you down here?" "I wanted to see how things were going," Wayne replied, his gaze sweeping the bustling space. "And to thank you for stepping up these past few weeks." Marco raised an eyebrow, wiping his hands on his apron. "It hasn't been easy, but we're managing. The new training sessions have been helpful, though some of the younger staff still have a lot to learn," Wayne chuckled. "They'll get there. With leaders like you guiding them, I have no doubt." Marco grunted, but there was a hint of pride in his expression. "We'll keep at it. Just make sure the rest of the hotel holds up its end." Wayne nodded, clapping the chef on the shoulder. "Count on it." As he left the kitchen, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a message from Jake. "He's here. Greg. He's in the parking lot talking to some of the staff." Wayne's expression hardened. He quickened his pace, heading toward the rear entrance of the hotel. Tiffany intercepted him in the hallway, her face tense. "Did you see the message?" she asked. "I did," Wayne said, his voice low but firm. "Let's go." The parking lot was quiet, the distant hum of traffic the only sound as Wayne and Tiffany approached. Near the far corner, Greg stood with a small group of former employees, his posture exuding false confidence. He was speaking animatedly, his gestures sharp and deliberate. As Wayne approached, Greg's voice faltered, his gaze narrowing. "Well, if it isn't the Savior himself," Greg sneered. "Come to preach another sermon?" Wayne stopped a few feet away, his expression calm but unyielding. "I'm here to remind you that this hotel stands for something bigger than you. Or me." Greg scoffed, his smirk fading slightly. "You think you can fix everything with your speeches and promises? You're living in a fantasy." Wayne took a step closer, his voice steady. "Maybe, but I'd rather live in a fantasy where people treat each other with respect than in your reality of fear and manipulation." The tension crackled like static electricity, the small crowd watching with bated breath. Greg opened his mouth to respond, but Wayne cut him off. "You're done here, Greg," he said firmly. "Leave now, and don't come back." For a moment, Greg hesitated, his bravado faltering. Then, with a muttered curse, he turned and walked away, his followers scattering in his wake. Wayne watched him go, a mix of relief and resolve settling over him. As Tiffany stepped up beside him, her voice was quiet, but filled with pride. "You didn't just stand up to him," she said. "You stood up for all of us." Wayne nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Because this is more than a hotel. It's a second chance, for everyone." The day of the grand reopening dawned with the promise of renewal. The Blakewood Hotel, once a symbol of quiet decay beneath its polished surface, now stood as a testament to transformation. The facade gleamed under the rare Seattle sunshine, every window meticulously cleaned, every detail reflecting a sense of purpose that hadn't been present for years. Inside, the air buzzed with anticipation. Staff members moved with precision, their uniforms crisp and their expressions focused. It wasn't just another day. It was the day. The culmination of weeks of effort, long conversations, and a collective belief that things could be different. Wayne Blake stood in the center of the grand ballroom, which had been transformed into an elegant space for the evening's event. Tables adorned with white linens and centerpieces of fresh flowers stretched across the room. A soft glow from the chandeliers bathed everything in warm light, lending the space an air of magic. Tiffany approached him, her clipboard tucked under one arm, but her usual businesslike demeanor softened by a rare smile. "Everything's on schedule," she said, her voice steady but tinged with excitement. "The guests will start arriving in an hour." Wayne nodded, his eyes scanning the room. "It looks incredible. They did a great job." "They did," Tiffany agreed, her tone turning thoughtful. "And so did you." Wayne met her gaze, his own expression reflective. "It wasn't just me. It was all of us. Everyone who decided to believe in what we're trying to build." Tiffany's smile widened slightly, but before she could respond, Rachel Morgan appeared at Wayne's side, her heels clicking softly against the polished floor. "Wayne," Rachel said, her tone brisk but not unkind. "We have a last-minute change to the seating arrangements. Sophia Williams requested to sit near the kitchen entrance so she can observe the staff in action." Wayne raised an eyebrow but nodded. "Sophia always has an angle. Let's accommodate her." Rachel made a note on her tablet and left just as Jake Reynolds entered the ballroom, his energy palpable. "Mr. Blake," Jake called, his voice carrying across the room. "We've got the final head count. It's a full house." Wayne smiled, clapping the young man on the shoulder. "Good work, Jake. Make sure everyone is ready. Tonight, we show them who we are." Jake nodded enthusiastically and hurried off, leaving Wayne and Tiffany alone again. She glanced at him, her expression turning curious. "Are you nervous?" Wayne hesitated, then let out a quiet laugh. "More than I expected to be, but it's a good kind of nervous." Tiffany nodded, understanding. "That's because it matters." As the sun dipped below the horizon, guests began to arrive. The ballroom filled with a mix of familiar faces and new ones, philanthropists, business leaders, loyal patrons of the Blakewood, and a few curious newcomers. Each guest was greeted with warmth and professionalism, their first impressions carefully managed by the front desk and concierge teams. Sophia Williams was among the first to arrive, her sharp gaze taking in every detail as she was escorted to her table. She nodded approvingly at the setup, but said little, her expression unreadable. By the time the event was in full swing, the room buzzed with conversation and laughter. Wayne moved through the crowd, his interactions genuine but purposeful. He spoke with longtime patrons, thanked new guests for attending, and ensured every detail met the high standards he had set. Yet, as he moved from table to table, his focus remained on the people who had made this night possible, the staff. Near the back of the room, Emma stood with a tray of glasses, her posture straight and her movements fluid. She noticed Wayne watching her and offered a tentative smile. He returned it, giving her a small nod of encouragement. Nearby, Jake helped direct a group of waitstaff, his energy infectious as he kept things running smoothly. Tiffany joined Wayne at the edge of the room, her expression thoughtful as she watched the scene unfold. "It's working," she said softly. "It's a start," Wayne replied. "But tonight isn't the finish line, it's just the beginning." As the evening progressed, Wayne stepped onto the small stage at the front of the room, a quiet hush falling over the crowd. He adjusted the microphone, his gaze sweeping the room before he began to speak. "Good evening," he said, his voice carrying effortlessly across the space. "Thank you all for being here tonight. This hotel has always been more than just a place to stay. It's a reflection of the values we hold, the people we serve, and the community we're a part of." He paused, letting his words settle before continuing. "A few weeks ago, we faced hard truths about who we were and where we were falling short. But those moments of reflection allowed us to grow, to recommit to what the Blakewood stands for. And what it stands for is simple: kindness, integrity, and excellence." The room remained silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. Wayne's voice softened, taking on a more personal tone. "None of this would have been possible without the incredible people who make this hotel what it is. Our staff. They are the heart and soul of the Blakewood, and tonight I want to celebrate them." A wave of applause rippled through the room as Wayne stepped back, gesturing toward the staff gathered near the back. Emma's cheeks flushed as the attention turned to her, while Jake beamed with pride. Even the usually stoic Rachel allowed herself a small smile. Wayne returned to the microphone, his expression earnest. "This is just the beginning. Together we're building something stronger, something that will last. Thank you for believing in us." The applause swelled, filling the ballroom with a sense of unity and possibility. Wayne stepped down from the stage, his heart full as he rejoined the crowd. Later that night, as the last guests departed and the ballroom began to empty, Wayne stood near the windows, gazing out at the quiet city. Tiffany approached, her steps light but deliberate. "You should go home," she said gently. "It's been a long day." Wayne smiled faintly, but didn't move. "I just wanted to take a moment to appreciate this." Tiffany joined him, her gaze following his. "You did it, Wayne. You brought this place back to life." He shook his head slightly. We did it. Every one of us. For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, the weight of the night giving way to a quiet sense of accomplishment. Finally, Tiffany spoke, her voice soft but firm. So, what's next? Wayne's smile widened, his eyes gleaming with determination. Next, we keep going. Because this is more than a hotel. It's a second chance. For everyone. The rain began to fall again, its steady rhythm a reminder that even amidst challenges, growth was always possible. Together they turned away from the windows, ready to face whatever came next. Because the Blakewood Hotel wasn't just rebuilt. It was reborn, and its best days were still ahead.